First, to the ups and downs of old age in Nigeria. One of the biggest issues of our time is the challenge of aging, and nowhere more so than in this country. More than 10 million Nigerians are currently over the age of 65, and estimates suggest that by 2030 there'll be 20 million of them over that age. Nigeria is, of course, not alone. One of the ethical dilemmas facing societies around the world today is gerontology or aging. So in those circumstances, how is Nigeria preparing to take care of its older, aging population? Well, it's set up a National Senior Citizen Center whose purpose is to identify the needs of senior citizens and work out how to fix them. And the NSCC is holding the first presidential summit on aging in Nigeria this weekend. Sounds like a plan, doesn't it? But how is it all working in practice? And is it translating into real measurable improvements in the lot of Nigeria's elderly population? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the Director General of the National Senior Citizen Center, Dr. Emem Omokaro. And from our Lagos studios, I'm also joined by Abiola Osibanjo, owner of Bethcare Nursing, which provides high-quality care to elderly patients. Thank you very much indeed to both of you. Let me come straight away first to you, Director General. Let me ask you this, just to be clear, when in Nigeria does old age actually kick in these days? Is it at age 60, 65, 70 or over?
Yeah, going by National Policy on Aging, which was recently approved, that's 60 years. Mm-hmm. Also going by mandatory retirement age, that's 60 years for most public servants. Although also you have for the judiciary, and then for professors in the academia, you have 70 years retirement. Mm. And then, of course, the National Senior Citizen Center acts, for enjoyment of some facilities, 70 years. So yes, officially 60 years, and I think we will work further as an agency to ensure that we reconcile this, but I would say 60 years. Right.
Well, stay with us because I'm going to come back to you in a minute. But let me come to you, Abiola Osibanjo, in our studios there in Lagos. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and I hope you can hear me. She's the owner of Bethcare Nursing, which provides high-quality care to elderly citizens. If you had to give a date, given your experience with older people, would you say that in today's world, 60s, 70s or 80s is the age of, becoming sort of a senior citizen? Because, I mean, life expectancy is increasing all over the world, isn't it?
Yes. Hello. Thanks for having me. Yes. 60, 70, thereabout is the age where you have more people retiring and older adults needing more healthcare facilities and stuff like that. So yeah, 60 to 70 seems like a pretty good age where we have more retirees and more older adults needing more assistance in the community, yes.
Yeah, we're both agreed on that. That's a good way to start. I mean, they're both agreed, I meant to say. But let me come to you, Dr. Omakaro. It's interesting, isn't it, that there appears to be a yawning gap on policy for the older population in Nigeria, when in fact Nigerian politics, interestingly, is dominated by a gerontocracy from the president himself down. And you would think that the elderly, the so-called silver vote, would have an impact on policy.
I would like to put that in the context of a traditional, understanding of aging and the responsibility of care for older persons. Traditionally, care falls to the family. It's the family that cares. And for a long time, very long time, until very recently, government had little or nothing to do with that. And so for a long time, and also because of ageism, the stereotypes, prejudices and discrimination, of persons who are old, the policy thrust and also looking at the population dynamics where you have,
absolutely,
majority, the bulk being the youth. So the focus, because of the policy thrust, was on the youth. And then also traditionally, culturally, it was thought that older persons were okay with family. So
that they'd be looked after.
They were looked after. So until now, and of course, with urbanization, migration, globalization, and then COVID-19 as well, now became the lens through which we are looking at issues of older persons, and now knowing that indeed government has to step in and build institutional capacities and have a policy and put all the frameworks so that government can now.
Right. I'm going to come to that in a minute, and I'm going to come to Abiola Osibanjo in Lagos in a minute. But just picking up from what you were saying there is, of course, the other issue that is equally important called generational succession. In most societies, we know that older people pass down assets, status, power, and wealth down to sort of younger generations in a sort of particular rhythm. But with the kind of long lives we're now having, and these multiple generations living together, the big question must be what happens when you don't inherit from your parents when you're 80? Because, I mean, you're finding people who are in their 60s, 70s, some even in their 80s, and their parents and possibly grandparents are still alive.
Well, you see, that would not really be an issue here, because when you look at Nigeria, as you would look at most African countries, especially in the sub-Saharan African countries, we don't even have the generational wealth to inherit. We are talking about poverty. We are talking about population that is undersaved. We are talking about population that is vulnerable. And so you really do not have maybe a very minute amount of the percentage of the population. You're talking about generational inheritance. But most of, what you find is that indeed, even the youths are not even standing to be part of the rural businesses that are their family community enterprises. They are running away. In fact, that's why the National Senior Citizen Center is trying to reorient, focus on community building, community wealth shared, cooperative shared prosperity, and then incentivizing the youth to go back. So yes, well, for the few percentage, just a minute amount of the population that have this problem, well, I'm sure that those ones who have old money already have laid down succession structures.
Okay, that's an interesting answer. Let me come to you there, Abiola Osibanjo in Lagos, and thank you very much indeed for staying with us. Let's talk about an area that directly affects where you work and your sort of nursing home and so on. I've heard people involved in geriatric care, which is of course multidisciplinary, saying that a major challenge they face in geriatric practice is in not having the full complement of supporting disciplines, including things like physiotherapy, pharmacy, psychiatrists, to name a few, together. Is that what you found to be the case?
In private practice in Nigeria, I think we are able to collaborate with a lot of people that work in the public sector to bring this kind of care to the home. The only thing is, most of these people are stretched thin, especially the ones in the public sector. So they are not able to provide as in-depth service that we would like to provide for our patrons in the house. So they're left without those specialties and services that you would have in a traditional hospital. So a lot of the older adults that require full holistic collaborative care are not necessarily getting it in the home, because the professionals are stretched thin because of migration. A lot of people in those professions are leaving. So when you get good quality professional help, they don't want to come to the house, which is where we focus our care on.
Okay, let me come to you, Dr. Omakaro, because obviously older adults will be better served if they can come into one building and everyone who needs to see them is there, the eye doctor, the
Yes.
ear specialist, the dentist,
Yes.
etc.
Yes.
Is there a plan for that sort of one-stop shop which would help an older adult not to have to make several trips? And we've got less than a minute, so keep it
Yeah,
reasonably
as a matter
short.
of fact, that plan, had been a policy directive by the National Council on Health. Looking at the tertiary, hospitals, the teaching hospitals, there was a directive that they should have geriatric centers as a one-stop shop. And then, of course, that would proceed to secondary facilities. State governments should ensure that that happens.
Right, and what stage is that at now?
I know that a few teaching hospitals have had that. For instance, you have the Chief Tony and any geriatric center in Ibadan. That was the first. And I know that University Teaching Hospital Benin, they have not necessarily a geriatric center, but they have a geriatric unit.
Right,
And
okay,
then, of
stay
course,
with us. We're going to come back and talk some more about this. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about senior citizens and the growing problem of aging in Nigeria and what's being done about it. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Aniugolu. So, is Nigeria doing enough to support its more mature population? Well, according to many senior citizens, the answer is an emphatic no. They say Nigeria's politicians appear to be unaware of the suffering experienced by elderly people in this country, even though many of those same politicians are themselves senior citizens. So how is Nigeria preparing to take care of its older aging population, especially with the Global Age Watch Index ranking Nigeria as one of the worst countries in the world for an older person to live in? According to estimates, there are currently around 10 million Nigerians over the age of 65, and by 2030 that number is set to double to around 20 million. And with me in the studio, the Director General of the National Senior Citizens Centre, Dr. Emem Omokaro, and from our Lagos studios, Abiola Osibanjo, owner of Bethcare Nursing, which provides high-quality care to elderly patients. Thank you very much indeed to both of you for staying with us. Let me come to you there in Lagos, Abiola Osibanjo. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Okay. Now, the advantage for Nigeria is, of course, that the developing world is not aging as rapidly as the developed world. Would you say that this presents an opportunity to start putting structures in place so that when aging accelerates here in Nigeria, we already have a system to take care of this country's older population?
Yes, I absolutely agree. In other developed countries, they have things in place for adults that helps them integrate back into the social community to make sure they're not being left out, they're not being neglected, because in this age where everybody, the younger generation is getting into tech and all that stuff, the older generation in other countries are being put in consideration. There's things put in place for them. I mean, from when you work, countries that have Social Security, that have Medicare, Medicaid, generalized healthcare for older adults, we seem to be lacking a bit in that. So the older adults that we have in Nigeria now tend to depend solely on private sector. And I think a lot needs to be done by the public sector to provide and make a provision for the older adults that are, we that we're going to get older, and the older adults that are coming behind us. So I think it's something that is heavily needed in Nigeria at the moment. So yeah, I believe so.
Okay, well, the government would argue that they are already in the process of doing something about that. With me, of course, the Director General of the National Senior Citizens Centre, Dr. Emem Omokaro. Just tell us more, Dr. Omakaro, about the National Senior Citizens Centre that you are Director General of. What does it actually do?
Thank you very much. I wish to say that the National Senior Citizens Centre was established by an act of the National Assembly, National Senior Citizens Centre Act 2017. And of course, the mandate of the National, I would say that the inauguration of the board was June 7th. So we are about 6 months old now, so it's fairly very new. And the mandate of the center is to identify the needs of senior citizens and to cater for those needs. And then the Act further now identifies the domains that we should look at, and that includes health, social programs, initiating, developing livelihood, income-generating programs, and of course sports, recreation, and counseling, trainings, opportunities to enhance the capacities of older persons, that they can continue to participate in the things that they enjoy. And then, of course, research and building data systems.
Yeah, but that's your mandate.
That's our
What
mandate.
successes can you point to that you've
far,
recorded since
yes.
you were set up?
So far, since June 7th, we are about now validating our strategy plan, since it's a new agency. We have undertaken stakeholder consultations around the country, and developed and set up the National Technical Working Group. To take off, you have to have a strategy. This is new. And I want to say that the National Senior Citizen Center is a peculiar agency. Why is it peculiar? Because most of these domains I mentioned to you belong to the statutory mandates of major ministries. So we have structured partnerships. We have mapped out all the critical stakeholders, including private sector. We have had engagement with the private sector because, as you know, and as my presenter would tell you, in other climes, developed climes, aging is an industry. Care of the geriatric population is an industry. So we are positioning the National Senior Citizen Center, first and foremost, to be able to reach out to where more than 70% of our constituencies are, in the rural and the remote areas. So we are looking, and we have structured partnerships with those government agencies and organizations that have the statewide reach, first and foremost. And beginning from January, we are reaching out to states, because indeed our stakeholders consultations, brought in, representatives of states. Right now, we have been able to develop also with the collaboration of senior citizens themselves, private sector, the main agencies responsible for this mandate, to develop some programs. And then we'll now go ahead to build capacity, because you would know that aging is an emerging issue, and for a long time older persons were left out of policy. So that means that there are two streams now that we are running. First is to ensure aging mainstreaming into already existing programs and services that hitherto older persons were excluded. And then, of course, are developing our own flagship programs and services, concrete programs and services, implementation plan and all that. Right. So we are running on 2 tracks. And
okay.
Very soon we'll do that.
Let me come to you, Abiola Osibanjo, owner of Bethcare Nursing there in Lagos. I mean, I've read somewhere that the NSCC is suggesting that they've provided or are trying to provide geriatric infrastructure, trained health workers in geriatric care and home services for the elderly, etc. From your perspective, as someone who provides high quality care to the elderly, are you feeling any of that?
As part of, we belong to the NCC and some of this older adult coalitions that are coming up as healthcare providers. We sit down on these meetings and we give our input to these meetings. I'm part of the board that is the Coalition for the Elder Adult in Nigeria. I see that it's growing, it's new, it's something that we're really putting, we're getting our feet wet with, but honestly, it's going to take a bit of structure from the public sector, from the government, from the local government to the state level, to the federal level. A lot of work still needs to be put into this process, because like my co-presenter said, it's something that they just elected the board 6 months ago. So we are in a long outstretched fight to make sure there's inclusivity with the elder adults in all the sectors in Nigeria at the moment. So I think it's feasible, but we have a long road ahead.
Right,
so
okay, we've got just about a minute left. Before we go, just tell us about your summit. You've got a presidential summit on aging that's coming up this weekend, in fact.
Yes, on Friday. This is historic. The very first time we're going to have a presidential summit. And this is also a testimony and expression that issues of older persons is no longer, being dismissed. That older persons now have, because of the national policy now that exists, and because of the act that now exists, the legal framework that now exists, and now a dedicated entity, legal entity, to coordinate, to mainstream. So now older persons now have the institutional platform now, and with sustainability, to now be mainstreamed everywhere and to create their own programs and to feel a sense of belonging. So for the first time, we are having the presidential summit. The president is invited as a special guest of honor, members of the Federal Executive Council, persons from state, the stakeholders. And then, of course, it is also an opportunity
Very briefly,
to celebrate older persons and recognize some older persons in about 8 categories that had done so much but were not celebrated.
I want to thank you very much indeed, Dr. Emem Omokaro, Director General of the National Senior Citizen Center, and from Lagos, Abiola Osibanjo, owner of Bethcare Nursing.